The galaxy was quiet. Too quiet. The stars shone coldly over the ruins of a war that had left entire planets shattered. Debris floated in the void like ghosts, remnants of battles between human colonies and alien empires. Ships lay broken and twisted, metal groaning in the vacuum, their colors faded from fire and radiation. Smoke rose from craters where weapons had struck with terrifying force, but now there was nothing alive, at least almost nothing. Among the silence, a faint sound echoed, soft and fragile. A small, desperate cry that seemed almost impossible in the emptiness of space. The aliens who had survived the war stopped moving. They scanned the debris, their many eyes wide. No one had expected to hear life here, especially not a sound like this. "Is it human?" one of the smaller aliens whispered, its voice trembling. Humans had been declared extinct in this sector. The war had supposedly wiped out every last one of them. Yet that cry was unmistakable. Cautiously they moved closer. Under a pile of broken metal and scorched debris, a tiny figure shivered. A human baby no older than a few months, lay wrapped in tattered blankets, eyes wide and frightened. The child's small chest rose and fell quickly as it cried, arms flailing helplessly. The aliens had never seen anything so fragile. One of them stepped forward, a large creature with wings like molten silver. It bent over the baby, curious and careful. "It is alive," it said softly, almost to itself. The others hesitated. Some wanted to leave. After all, humans were dangerous in stories and this one could be a trap. But something about the sound of the baby's cries drew them closer. The baby reached out its tiny hands, grabbing at the air, and one alien felt a strange tug in its heart, a feeling it did not understand. The war had taken everything, homes, families, entire planets. But here was a creature that had survived it all. Alone yet alive. Suddenly, a rumble shook the debris. A larger explosion from a distant part of the battlefield sent sparks and metal flying. The aliens froze, instincts telling them to flee. The baby's cries grew louder, desperate and frightened. One of the aliens hesitated, torn between fear and something else, something like compassion. "Leave it," another hissed, eyes narrowing. "It is just a human. Dangerous. Why risk ourselves?" But the first alien could not move. Its gaze stayed on the small, trembling figure. The baby looked up with wide eyes, and in that instant, the creature felt something it had not felt in centuries: hope. No one had expected life to survive here. No one had imagined that after all the destruction, something as small and fragile as a human infant could still exist. And yet here it was, defying the odds. The aliens gathered around the baby, unsure of what to do. The sound of the cries filled the hollow ruins like a small, bright star in endless darkness. Even the wind seemed to pause, carrying the fragile notes of life across the barren landscape. The baby's blanket was torn, and its small body was covered in ash and dust. It coughed weakly, and the aliens saw the sharp rise and fall of its chest. Its tiny fingers curled and uncurled, reaching, grasping as if seeking something, someone, to protect it. One of the creatures, larger than the others, stepped forward carefully, extending a clawed hand. It hovered above the infant for a moment, uncertain. Then, as if by instinct, it scooped the baby into its massive arms. The child let out a surprised, tiny squeak but did not cry anymore. Instead, it stared up at its rescuer, wide-eyed and trusting. The other aliens watched in silence. Something unusual had happened here, something no one could explain. The baby had survived not because of strength, not because of skill, but because of sheer chance. Or perhaps something greater. And now, in the arms of a creature stronger than most armies, it was safe at least for a moment. As the creatures moved away from the crumbling ruins, the battlefield behind them glowed with fires slowly dying out. The stars above seemed colder than before, but there was a strange warmth in the alien's chest as it held the human child. A tiny life, almost too small to matter, had survived the worst of the galaxy. And maybe, just maybe, that tiny life would change everything. The first cries of hope had sounded, and in a galaxy full of war and despair, they would not be ignored. The alien holding the baby moved slowly through the ruins, careful not to disturb the unstable metal and rubble around them. The cries had stopped, replaced by quiet gurgles as the child's wide eyes looked around, taking in the strange, broken world. The creature didn't understand why it felt a pull toward this tiny human, but it could not deny it. Something about this fragile life called to it in a way the battlefield never had. Suddenly the air around them shifted. A deep, rumbling sound rolled across the ruined landscape, vibrating through the metal and the bones of destroyed ships. The other aliens froze, sensing something enormous approaching. From the void of space, a shadow descended, massive wings stretching wider than any starship, scales shimmering in colors that seemed impossible to describe, was a dragon. Not a dragon from old human stories, but a living, breathing, intelligent alien dragon, feared across countless star systems for its power and wisdom. The baby stirred in the alien's arms, sensing something different. Even though it had never seen this creature before, it turned its tiny head toward the dragon, eyes wide with wonder. The dragon's gaze fell on the child, and for a long moment, nothing else mattered. The battlefield, the smoke, the ruins, they all disappeared in its mind. Here was life, pure and unspoiled in the midst of death. The other aliens hesitated. They knew the stories. Dragons did not care for humans. They were predators, rulers of planets, forces of destruction. To approach one was dangerous. To be seen protecting a human child could mean death. But the creature holding the baby felt a strange calm. The dragon did not attack. It did not roar or snap. Instead, it lowered its massive head, eyes locking on the infant. A quiet, almost invisible hum filled the air. The dragon's presence was overwhelming, but it carried a strange warmth. The alien holding the child felt its fear fading. It was as if the dragon recognized the child in a way no one else could, sensing the life that survived the war, the hope that refused to die. Slowly, the dragon extended one enormous claw, careful not to frighten the infant. The alien instinctively stepped back, unsure of what to do. But the baby, as if understanding, reached out a tiny hand. The dragon's claw hovered just above it, and then gently touched the child's fingers. The baby giggled, a sound so pure and full of life that it seemed to push back the darkness of the ruined battlefield. The other aliens stared, unable to look away. No one had ever seen a human cause such a reaction in a creature as fearsome as a dragon. It was not fear. It was care. Protection. Something ancient and powerful stirred in the dragon's eyes. The battlefield, the fires, the war, it all faded from its mind. Here, in its claws, was something worth saving. Without a sound, the dragon shifted, carefully lifting the baby from the alien's arms. The child squealed in surprise but did not cry. Instead, it wrapped tiny fingers around one of the dragon's claws, gripping tightly. The alien who had carried the child felt a strange mix of relief and awe. The dragon had claimed the human without force, without anger. It had simply chosen to protect. The dragon unfurled its wings, casting a shadow across the ruined landscape. The other aliens instinctively moved back, unsure if they should flee or stay. But the dragon made no move to harm them. Its attention was solely on the child, who now sat securely against its chest, eyes wide and curious. The dragon's scales shimmered as it rose from the battlefield, lifting toward the stars, carrying the tiny survivor away from the ruins. As they ascended, the alien who had found the baby whispered almost to itself, Why would a dragon care for a human? But even as the question left its lips, it knew there was no answer. Some things in the galaxy were beyond explanation. Some bonds were older than war, older than empires. This was one of them. The baby looked up at the dragon, and in that gaze, something unspoken passed between them. Trust. Safety. A promise that, for now, nothing would harm it. The dragon seemed to understand, a quiet rumble vibrating through its chest, and it adjusted its flight, careful not to jostle the child. Below, the ruins of the war stretched endlessly. Fires burned out, ships drifted like ghosts, and the silence of destruction hung heavy in the air. But above it all, life had found a way. The dragon carried the baby into the void, into the unknown, but away from death and fear. For the first time since the war began, there was hope. The baby gurgled happily, reaching for the dragon's face. The dragon tilted its massive head, allowing the tiny fingers to touch its scales. It was a small gesture, but it sealed a bond that nothing could break. A human child, lost in the galaxy, had been claimed by a creature stronger than any army, wiser than any council, and more patient than time itself. Somewhere, deep in the stars, the dragon knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy had tried to end humanity. But one small life, fragile and innocent, had survived. And in its care, that life would grow, learn, and maybe one day change everything. The ruined battlefield disappeared behind them, and the dragon soared into the unknown. The baby laughed, tiny hands clinging to scales that glittered like starlight. Hope had taken flight, and nothing in the galaxy could stop it. The dragon's home was unlike anything the baby had ever seen, or could imagine. It was a massive cavern floating in the void of space, its walls glowing with soft bioluminescent light. Strange plants grew along the rocks, their leaves shimmering like tiny stars. Pools of water reflected the colors of the cavern, and the air was filled with gentle hums, as if the place itself was alive. The baby had grown since that day in the war ruins. She was no longer a helpless infant, but a curious child, her small hands constantly reaching out to touch everything. Her dark eyes sparkled with wonder as she explored the alien world around her. The dragon, once terrifying to anyone who had seen it in battle, had become her protector, her teacher, and, in a way, her parent. Every day the dragon showed her something new. It taught her how to move carefully over the glowing rocks, how to avoid the sharp edges of crystal formations, and how to listen to the quiet voices of the cavern. The child learned quickly, her human curiosity guiding her. She asked questions constantly, though the dragon's answers were slow and patient, like sunlight filtering through clouds. At first, the dragon struggled to understand her. Humans were fragile, unpredictable, and loud, unlike the other creatures it had known. But over time, it began to see something remarkable. The child was clever, brave, and resilient. She asked questions that no alien had ever considered, and she solved small problems in ways the dragon had never expected. One afternoon, the child found a small, cracked crystal near the edge of a pool. She held it up, turning it in her hands. "Look," she said, her voice high and clear. "It makes the light dance." The dragon bent its massive head closer, watching the tiny patterns the crystal cast on the cavern walls. "Yes," it rumbled softly. "You see what others do not." The child smiled. She had learned to trust the dragon completely. She no longer cried when it moved its massive claws near her, nor did she fear its roaring voice when it spoke. She understood that its strength was not meant to harm her, but to protect her. And in return she brought something into the dragon's life that it had long forgotten: warmth, laughter, and hope. Time passed. The child grew taller, stronger, but she never lost her small human fragility. She learned to climb the dragon's back, holding onto its shimmering scales as it soared through the void. She learned to speak the ancient, low-frequency sounds that the dragon used to communicate, and slowly, a unique bond formed between them. Words were not enough to describe it. The dragon and the child understood each other in ways no one else could. One day, while exploring the edges of the cavern, the child found a nest of strange, glowing eggs. They pulsed with light, and the child stared at them in fascination. "Are these babies?" she asked. The dragon nodded slowly. "They are life," it said. "And life must be protected. Just like you." The child reached out, her small fingers brushing one of the eggs. The dragon lowered its massive head beside her, watching. For the first time, it seemed almost vulnerable, as if it, too, felt the weight of responsibility. The child giggled, bouncing on her feet. "I want to help you protect them," she said. The dragon rumbled, a deep, vibrating sound that filled the cavern. It was not a sound of warning but of agreement. The child was learning more than survival. She was learning care, responsibility, and courage. And in turn she was teaching the dragon something it had long forgotten: that even the strongest beings could be softened by love and trust. Life in the dragon's cavern was peaceful, but not without challenges. Strange creatures occasionally wandered in from the void, curious or hungry. The child learned quickly how to hide, how to move quietly, and how to signal the dragon when danger approached. Each time, the dragon acted with precise force, defending its home without harming those who did not deserve it. The child watched, learning lessons in strategy and judgment. As the child grew, the dragon began to realize something extraordinary. Humans were fragile in appearance, but their minds were sharp, their instincts quick, and their hearts unyielding. The child had survived where armies had failed, where weapons had destroyed planets. And she was not alone now. She had the dragon, a creature of immense power and knowledge, guiding her, teaching her, and protecting her. One evening, the child sat on a glowing rock, gazing out into the star-filled void beyond the cavern. The dragon hovered nearby, its wings folded, eyes reflecting the soft lights of the cavern. "Will humans ever come back?" the child asked quietly. The dragon's gaze was distant, thoughtful. "Perhaps," it rumbled. "If they survive, if they learn, if they remember what you have learned here." The child smiled. She didn't fully understand what that meant, but she knew she wanted to try. She wanted to be ready for whatever the galaxy had left, whatever it would throw at her next. And she knew she would not be alone. In the quiet of the cavern, life continued. The child learned, the dragon watched, and hope grew. The galaxy beyond was still dangerous, still full of war and fear, but here, in this glowing, floating sanctuary, a human had a chance to survive, and maybe one day to thrive. And somewhere deep inside the dragon, a thought began to grow. Perhaps this small human child could change everything. The peace of the dragon's cavern could not last forever. Even in the far reaches of the galaxy, news traveled fast. The child was no longer just a baby, she had grown into a clever, curious human. And for those who believed humanity had been wiped out, her survival was a dangerous secret. Rumors reached alien warlords and scavengers scattered across distant star systems. Whispers of a human child protected by a dragon stirred fear, curiosity, and greed. Many saw her as a threat, proof that humans could survive the war, and some saw her as a prize. They wanted the child for themselves, to use her as a tool, or worse, to destroy her before she became powerful. One quiet morning, as the child explored the glowing gardens of the cavern, a sudden tremor shook the ground. Rocks shifted, water rippled in the pools, and the dragon's ears twitched, sensing danger before anyone could speak. The child stumbled but quickly regained her balance, eyes wide. "What is it?" she asked. The dragon's eyes narrowed. "Intruders," it rumbled. Its voice carried weight, calm yet fierce. "They seek you." The child's small hands clenched instinctively. Fear mixed with determination. She had learned to survive, to move, to think quickly. She had the dragon, but she also had herself. And she would not run blindly. The first attackers appeared at the edge of the cavern, a group of raiders riding sleek, dark ships that hovered dangerously close. They carried weapons designed to pierce dragon scales and human flesh alike. They thought the child would be easy prey. They were wrong. The dragon spread its enormous wings, creating a shadow that fell over the intruders like a living storm. The child climbed onto its back, gripping the shimmering scales she knew so well. From this vantage point she could see everything: the attackers, the path they had taken, the weak points in their approach. She shouted directions to the dragon, pointing at gaps between rocks and narrow passages. The dragon listened, weaving through the cavern with incredible precision, guided by both instinct and the child's quick thinking. The raiders fired, but their weapons bounced harmlessly off the dragon's scales. The child ducked instinctively, marveling at the sheer power protecting her. She felt fear, yes, but also excitement. She was learning something that few humans had ever experienced: how it felt to fight alongside a creature stronger than any army, smarter than any general. One of the raiders tried to circle around, hoping to catch the child off guard. But the dragon's eyes were sharp, and the child noticed the movement. "Left," she shouted. "Left. They're trying to sneak behind us." The dragon twisted midair, wings beating like thunder. The raider's ship slammed against a rock wall and exploded in a burst of fire and smoke. The child's heart raced, but she felt a thrill. Together they were unstoppable. After the initial wave, more ships appeared on the horizon. The child's mind raced. She remembered the lessons the dragon had taught her: observation, patience, clever use of the environment. She pointed out weak spots in the enemy formations, helped the dragon anticipate attacks, and even suggested traps using the glowing crystals and pools of the cavern. Each time, the dragon followed her guidance, and together they defended their home. As the battle continued, the dragon and the child became a blur of motion, weaving through the cavern, diving and rising with incredible speed. The attackers underestimated them, assuming a human would be useless in such a fight. But the child's cleverness, combined with the dragon's power, turned the tide. One by one, the raiders were forced to retreat, their ships battered and broken. When the last attacker fled, the cavern was quiet again. The pools reflected soft, glowing light, untouched by the battle. The child sat on a rock, her small hands trembling with adrenaline. The dragon lowered its massive head beside her, eyes soft now, a quiet rumble of pride in its chest. "You were brave," the dragon said. "You did not panic. You thought, you acted, you survived." The child smiled, exhausted but proud. "I learned from the best," she said. "And you taught me everything I needed to know." For the first time, the dragon allowed itself a rare display of emotion, a deep, resonating vibration that filled the cavern. It had seen many battles, many wars, and many lives lost. But this human child, fragile as she appeared, had faced danger with courage and intelligence beyond her years. She was more than a survivor. She was a spark of hope in a galaxy that had nearly forgotten what hope looked like. The child looked out at the stars through the cavern's opening. Somewhere beyond the darkness, enemies still waited. But she no longer felt helpless. With the dragon at her side, she knew she could face anything. And as she sat there, small and determined, the dragon realized something important. Humans were not weak. They were underestimated, yes, but their resilience, intelligence, and courage could rival the strongest creatures in the galaxy. The galaxy might try to destroy them again, but it would fail. Not this child, not this dragon, not the hope they carried together. And somewhere deep inside, the child knew that this battle was only the beginning. The stars beyond the cavern glimmered like tiny fires in the endless darkness of space. The child sat on the dragon's back, her small fingers tracing the ridges of its shimmering scales. After the battle, the cavern was quiet once more, but the echoes of danger lingered in their minds. Still, neither of them feared the future. They had faced it together and had survived. The dragon's eyes scanned the horizon. Even though the raiders had been defeated, the galaxy was not empty. Other forces would come, seeking to destroy or capture the child. But the dragon knew they were ready. The child had learned quickly, faster than any human the dragon had heard of in stories. She was clever, brave, and strong in ways few could understand. And she was not alone. "Will humans really come back?" the child asked quietly, her voice small against the vastness of space. The dragon's deep rumble was thoughtful. "Perhaps," it said slowly. "If they survive, if they learn, if they remember what you have learned here." The child nodded, though she didn't fully understand. Still, she felt a fire within her chest. She wanted to help humanity, even if it was just a tiny spark against a galaxy that had tried to erase them. And with the dragon's guidance, she would be ready for anything. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. The dragon taught the child about the stars, about planets, about civilizations lost to war and time. She learned the languages of alien species, the ways of survival in space, and the secrets of the universe that only a creature like the dragon could reveal. And through it all, the dragon watched her with pride, seeing in her a reflection of something it had long forgotten: hope. One day, as they flew through a nebula of swirling colors, the child looked down at a tiny hidden planet below. Its surface was scarred from past battles, but green patches of life had begun to return. "Could humans live there?" she asked. The dragon nodded. "Yes, but they will need guidance. They will need protection, wisdom, and courage." The child's eyes sparkled. "Then we can help them, can't we?" "Yes," the dragon rumbled. "We can. And we will." The child's small hand rested against the dragon's chest, feeling the steady pulse of life beneath the scales. Together they were more than a protector and a child. They were a symbol of survival, of resilience, and of hope. Humans had been underestimated, dismissed as weak and fragile. But the child had proven them wrong. She had survived where armies had failed, where weapons had destroyed planets. And with the dragon by her side, humanity's future was no longer impossible. Word slowly began to spread. Aliens who had once feared humans began to see them in a new light. Stories of a human child protected by a dragon traveled across galaxies, inspiring curiosity, respect, and even a little fear. They were not the same humans as before the war. They were survivors, learners, and innovators. And at the center of this new chapter was a child who had faced destruction, learned courage, and grown strong under the care of the galaxy's most feared creature. One night, as the stars shimmered above them, the dragon lowered the child to the cavern floor. She looked out at the horizon, her heart filled with determination. "We can do it," she said softly. "We can help humans come back." The dragon lowered its massive head beside her, eyes glowing like distant suns. "Yes," it rumbled. "And together we will ensure they survive." The child smiled, feeling the weight of responsibility and the thrill of possibility. She had been found in the ruins of war, a fragile human among ashes and destruction. Yet here she was, alive, learning, and ready to face the galaxy. And in her heart, she carried something that no weapon could destroy: hope. The dragon spread its wings, and together, they rose above the cavern, soaring through the stars. The ruins below disappeared behind them, replaced by endless possibilities. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable, but they were ready. Humanity's story was not over. It was just beginning. Somewhere deep in the void, hidden among stars and planets, other humans waited, unaware that one of their own had survived. And when they discovered her, guided by the dragon, they would find not just survival, but hope, courage, and a chance to rise again. The child laughed softly, her small voice carried by the winds of space. The dragon rumbled in response, a deep, resonating sound that was both warning and promise. Together they moved forward, into the unknown, into adventure, into the future. The galaxy had tried to end humanity. It had failed. And now, with the child and the dragon leading the way, humanity had a chance to thrive once more. In the silence of space, a tiny life had survived. And with it, the hope of an entire species.